Greetings, social media kindred in spirit. I am Deborah, a custodian of the prompting of the divine mind in preparation for the bride of Christ, according to Matthew 22, 1 through 14, via the application of the principles of Jesus to obtain Christ's consciousness, which is ascension. We are discussing impulses, feminine, masculine, and the Christ impulse. We will proceed in discussing about Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is now an essential part of the way of the Christ, especially for this time of the second coming. She appears a number of times in the New Testament and is often the first woman mentioned, a sign of her importance. She was clearly on her own, having no husband or other family members with her. During the final, very intense days leading up to and including the crucifixion, most of the male disciples either abandoned Jesus or kept their distance. It was Mary Magdalene and a few other women disciples who chose to stay throughout. What elevated Mary the most was that she was the first person to whom Jesus appeared after his resurrection. There is a profound significance in this, as she was the first person to proclaim the good news that he had risen. It is the resurrection of Christ and the triumph over death which is the seminal essence of the Christic impulse. Why Mary Magdalene, one might ask? The reason it was twofold. She was closest to him, and she was his twin flame, in addition to the most illuminated disciple. The classically accepted head disciple, Peter, is recorded to having had a number of confrontations over his spiritual elevation and authority in comparison to that of Mary Magdalene. These are recorded in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Thomas, Pistis Sophia, and the Gospel of the Egyptians, all widely read and revered early Christian writings. Peter's reason for challenging Mary's authority was not her obvious illumination, but on the basis of rejecting women's authority to teach. The spiritual bias against women during those times was very evident in the Bible and was most certainly a major influence on how Mary Magdalene was presented in the original Gospel canon. The four biblical Gospels present a view that discipleship is primarily a male phenomenon, whereas the excluded texts, such as the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Thomas, and in the Gospel of Mary, all present the idea that both male and female disciples were disciples on an equal basis. In the Gospel of Philip, she is presented as a close intimate of Jesus and the most illumined disciple. The companion of the Savior is Mary Magdalene. The Savior loved her more than all the disciples, and he kissed her often. The other disciples said to him, "Why do you love her more than you love all of us?" The Savior answered and said to them, "Why do I not love you like her? If a blind person and one who can see are both in darkness, they are the same. When the light comes, the one who can see will see the light, and the blind person will stay in darkness." In the Gospel of Mary, the Magdalene is depicted as the calm, wise voice who directed the other disciples not to be fearful and to trust they would be led as to what to do next. She ensured them that Jesus would be with them to protect and guide them. At one point, Peter asked Mary to tell them what the Messiah had told her in private, and he admits that Jesus had loved her more than all the other disciples. She then launches into a profound spiritual vision that Jesus had given her of the soul's journey through the spiritual realms. Afterward, the disciples began agitated and argued over the validity of her vision and her role yet again. In the Pistis Sophia, the Magdalene is clearly presented as the most illumined and mystical of all the disciples. She frequently relates high spiritual vision and insight to the disciples during the time after the resurrection. She is depicted as the disciples providing the greatest spiritual insight, illumination, and direction. It is important to see this other, more accurate vision of the most acquainted, awakened disciple. This is the Mary Magdalene that was excluded from the canon of the New Testament by the male patriarchy. It seems all but certain that misogyny robbed the emergent impulse of the archetype of the highly awakened and spiritually advanced divine feminine present that was Mary Magdalene, thus making it potentially much more difficult for women in subsequent generations to own their own divinity and take their rightful stand as equal to disciples of Christ. All of this can and is being rectified and redeemed at this time. The feminine Christ impulse is emerging rapidly and essentially, for without it we will not have a true second and full coming of the Christic impulse. This is why she is so extremely important at this time. The Christ presence is always progressing, and on this planet even more so at this critical time. The second coming is a time when a new, more whole realization of the Christ is occurring, one which includes both the masculine and the feminine principles and relationship. It was not possible from an evolutionary standpoint for Jesus and Mary Magdalene to fully enter into the Christ consciousness together 2,000 years ago, due to the gross imbalances in the psychic structure of the earth and humanity. There was such a split between the masculine and feminine energies that it was impossible for the fullness of the unified Christ to come forth at that time. It could only come forth through the male presence of Jesus. Mary Magdalene held the deep feminine birthing space for this to occur and was deeply involved with Jesus Christ in this process. As mentioned above, if Mary and Jesus would have both become Christed, the distortion in the psychic structure of the earth would have been released too rapidly, causing shifts to occur that life would not have been able to integrate fully. The last 2,000 years have been about the Christ spirit coming more deeply and progressively embodied as the feminine has gradually come forth. Now is the time for the feminine Christ to step onto center stage, and the Magdalene, who is now an ascended master, to step into a role as a co-equal with the being we knew or know as Jesus or Yeshua. They are twin flames and are going to reunite as a joint Christ stewardship of the second coming. This is the principal reason why twin flames are coming back together at this time. It has been our role to go through the christening process, which is still moving forward, together as part of this. Sacred union and divine relationship is the next cycle that is unfolded. The lone wolf, spiritual male figure is exiting the stage, while the balanced male and female will step forth. This is called the Christ and dyadic union, meaning two beings who have fully realized their monadic nature will also merge to become a dyad. The same level of unity with one's individual God nature will also be realized with that of another. It is a momentous time, especially for many souls in feminine forms. We are now going to experience an immense empowerment and a strong impulse to step forth as equal spiritual beings in every respect. The male and female Christ counterparts must walk together unified, the Christ in dyadic union. I will repeat that. The male and female counterparts must walk together unified, the Christ in dyadic union, without perversion. Mary Magdalene was of a well-to-do family and because of her earthly opulence, she became deeply ego-identified with the richness of her life. Like most humans, she allowed her passions, sensuality, and desire for the beautiful things of the earth to open her to the subtle astral influences that caused her to become less than fully responsive to the impulses of her divine soul. When she first came into contact with her twin flame, Yeshua, she was immediately awakened as the light of Source descended and anchored in her soul. This often occurs when flames come together. Jesus worked with her to dispel the accumulated burden of the astral energies, which is referred to in the Bible as the casting out of 7 demons. Now, Magdalene was not possessed in the sense that others were possessed by demons, as discussed in the Bible. She was simply in a state that most human beings find themselves in, enshrouded in a veil of astral energy due to attachment and identification with the human world of sensory experience. Recognizing her twin flame, she wanted nothing more to be one with him and the light that he carried. This in turn ignited the light of the one in the core of her soul, and she rapidly awakened to become the most illumined disciple during the time of his ministry. The most important message Jesus communicated was his confirmation that there is indeed an entirely new dispensation of the Christ about to unfold on this planet. It is the Christ and dyadic union. This occurs when two beings realize their true God nature, the indestructible I am, or monad, our core nature as individuated aspects of God, one source, while in a complete merger with each other's divine essence. The two become one. Thus, sacred relationship and complete God union is the next step in the unfoldment of the Christ on this planet. The archetypal and fundamental masculine and feminine polarities will have been completely married, so that the split that has existed in the energy and consciousness of humanity and the earth will finally be healed. The masculine and feminine will stand together as co-equals, co-creators, birthing the new earth heaven. The feminine now stands on equal footing in every respect with the masculine, and this will soon become increasingly apparent in worldly affairs. Divine Christed relationships of all kinds are unfolding all over the planet. This will not only be between souls in close, intimate coupling relationships, but also in groups and soul families. We can attest to this through our own experiences, and this has been our journey over the last 2.5 decades. Look around and within, for one thing is certain. We are going to experience the rapid ascension of the sacred feminine, the Sophia Magdalene Christ, awakening and stepping on the dais of her position of power and dominion with a masculine Christ. It is time. Both the masculine and feminine will rise as this occurs, and life will be resurrected on this sacred earth. Thank you for your time. Until we meet again.